Hello and welcome to Talking Tolkien. Today we're going to have a look at a few different versions of the same book by Tolkien, which is one of his most popular and also one of his most controversial stories. Yes, so what I'll be looking at today is the Silmarillion. Now, this was initially released after Tolkien's death, so he died in 1973. This was released 4 years later, because when he died he left behind him so many papers and notes and transcripts of stories that had never been published. He'd been working on them throughout his life. Some of the first things he wrote were part of the Silmarillion, and some of the very final things he wrote were part of the Silmarillion. So it fell to his son, Christopher Tolkien, to try and pull those pieces together and try and form a cohesive narrative structure out of them, which is something that Tolkien himself had been trying to do over the final years of his life, but ultimately he'd run out of time to do that. So one of the major challenges Christopher Tolkien found when assembling these notes and pieces and papers was that there was no cohesive narrative structure in there. So the story we're left with well over 20 chapters is little vignettes almost, little self-contained stories which all add up to this wider myth. And that's what the Silmarillion is. So there's no framing device, there's no hobbits or anything like that, and that's why a lot of people have struggled with it. But if you get into it, certainly if you get past through some of the first cosmological chapters, then there is some fantastic stuff in here. So that's the Silmarillion. I'll do an in-depth video on it in the future, but for now I just want to look at the books themselves and see what's different about them. So if you're going to buy a book nowadays, that's the Silmarillion, which is the best version to get. So we'll start with this one, which is the original Silmarillion. 1977 it was published by J.R.R. and Unwin, who had been Tolkien's publishers since The Hobbit in 1937. So why should you buy this one? First of all, it's pretty inexpensive. When it was released, they made so many copies of this because there was such demand for it, some new Tolkien, and it was the long-awaited Silmarillion. So they sold absolutely thousands of them. So a lot of them now have found their way onto the second-hand market, so you can pick them up for, less than £10 for a decent copy of this. All I'd say is be patient and look around. So what's nice about it? Well, what I think's nice is, first of all, you've got an original copy of it, so this is as it originally appeared. You compare that to something like The Hobbit or The Lord of the Rings, try and get yourself a first edition of one of those, and you'll be paying a lot more than £10. So that's a nice thing. You've also got decent quality paper they used in here. You really notice this when you compare it to later Harpercollins editions. Certainly the non-deluxe editions aside, the paper quality here is just a lot heavier and feels a lot nicer to read. So you've got that. Also, one of my favourite things is at the back we've got this lovely map, just to have an idea of the size of it. There we are. So you can see, you really get to see a lot more detail, a lot more depth on these maps. They started to scale them down in later years. And also, it's the same with The Lord of the Rings. If you manage to pick up an earlier edition of one of those, then the maps are also a lot bigger. So to me, that's a definite plus point with these older Silmarillions. So yeah, that's the original Silmarillion. A few other things to note on this. The spines, if you're going to buy one, check the spines. You want one that's red, ideally, unless you don't mind having faded spines. But they seem to be quite prone to fading. Here's 3 copies that I've got, and you can see how much they've faded. You really want it to be nice and red. Also, another thing to look for in these is the 2 publishers. So we've got J.R.R. and Unwin there, but there's also BCA you'll see on the bottoms of it, and that's because it's published by Book Club Associates, which was like a mail order company before you had the internet. People would mail order them. I don't think it really matters for the sake of reading them, but you might want to get one that's by J.R.R. and Unwin, who are again the original publishers of it. So that's the original version. But let's say you don't want to get a second-hand book, you want to buy one new. And where can you go to find that? Well, they've got you covered. Here we have the Silmarillion. This is HarperCollins 2006 edition. And this is a nice little edition as well. What I like about it, it fits in well with other stories. So if you've got the Unfinished Tales, there's a very similar version of it to this. Similarly with the Lord of the Rings as well, the individual volumes all fit together quite well with this. It's worth comparing the maps though. The map here is a lot smaller than the one you get in the original version. So here you can see the difference between the two maps. As you can see, there's not a lot of contest really between the two, but again, it's personal preference. So what's nice about this is you get a couple of extra things at the front. So as well as the original foreword from 1977 by Christopher Tolkien, we get a 1999 preface to the second edition, again by Christopher Tolkien. And then we get a section of a letter that J.R.R. Tolkien wrote to Milton Waldman in 1951, where he went into a lot of detail about giving an overview really of what the Silmarillion was, because by that time it was something he'd spoken about, but no one really got a handle of exactly what it was. So he wrote this letter to explain what that is in quite a lot of depth. So that appears in the letters by J.R.R. Tolkien if you've got that book, but it's nice to have it here, and I think it does fit in quite well at the start of the Silmarillion. And then we just get into the general Aina Linde and all of the standard Silmarillion tales. So that's that one. Another nice thing is you've got a cover there. That's one of Tolkien's paintings himself. He did. So you can see that. But let's say you want something a little bit more deluxe than that, then we could go and get this, which is Silmarillion Deluxe Edition by Harpercollins. Now, what's nice about this? First of all, it does look a bit more deluxe. We get a nice thick slip cover with it. Just pull out of that, so that's pretty sturdy stuff, and it's got a nice little the original logo on there as well, emblem, which also appears embossed on the cover and on the back cover. There you go, you can see the J.R.R. as well. So in this, it's very similar to the version I just showed you with the contents. You get the preface of second edition, the letter to Milton Waldman. The only real difference is, as far as text goes, on the front page you get a nice look at that picture, and then on the page after that you can see that, which appeared on the paperback of the first paperback I had, so you might recognise that. But the paper's a lot nicer in here, as you'd expect. You get a little ribbon, which is nice to keep your place. But then I suppose the downside of this is it's at least twice as expensive as any of the other editions. But if you've got a number of the deluxe editions, they do look really nice lined up together. So that is an option. Okay, so that's the deluxe edition Silmarillion. But let's say you're still not happy with that. You'd like something that's got some more pictures. They've got you covered there as well, because you could get this Tolkien the Silmarillion illustrated by Ted Nasmith. Now, Ted Nasmith isn't as widely known as some of the other Tolkien illustrators, namely Alan Lee and John Hang, and I suppose that's because he didn't work on the Lord of the Rings, the film trilogy by Peter Jackson. He was actually asked, but he had a few things on at the time, so he said no, though I think he did come to regret that decision in time. Anyway, so he's illustrated this book. This was released in 2004, and it was kind of an update of this one, which was released in 1998, which I don't think you can get this anymore. But this had, again, by Ted Nasmith, this had 20 pictures, 20 paintings throughout, done by him. This updated version has 47, I think, certainly nearly 50, 47, 48 paintings done by Ted Nasmith. And yeah, I really like his paintings. They're for me, they really capture the spirit. And I think for something like the Silmarillion, where there's not been quite so much seen of it. So, for example, with Lord of the Rings, because you've had like film adaptations, etc., so that's a lot more lodged in the public consciousness. Whereas with the Silmarillion, that's not really happened yet. So I think his pictures really help to give a bit of context to that. So let's just have a quick look inside this. Got a lovely map here we can see. That's Beleriand. Again, based on Christopher Tolkien's version. But it's quality paper, nice big text, and it's just full of pictures, which is really nice to see. So there we have it. Hopefully that's been useful at looking at a few of the editions of the Silmarillion that you can get nowadays. If you did want to buy one of the editions I've gone through which is still in print, please feel free to do me a favour and click on the affiliate links which I've added below. Also, if you've enjoyed the video, please let me know in the comments and I'll do some more of them. If you haven't enjoyed it, let me know and I won't do any more of them. I think that's all there is to say on this one. So you've been watching Talking Tolkien. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.
Wow.